there, playing his Mewtwo, and we're starting straight in here with Christian going first.
And we look at those prizes straight away, and we notice the the Mew VMax there. 2 of them featured in the prizes, could be relevant later on. And loving the card selection here. Got a chance to chat with Christian yesterday, and you know, players at this level, they want to try and make it as easy as possible for them when they're going through the deck, and see the variety in designs. You've got the rainbow Mews in there, you've got the full arts, you've got the gold cards, you've got some reverses to try and help when looking through your deck for deck check. Yeah, it's something some players do really like to be able to see as well. A lot of shiny cards, I think, is my first take. There, as we see the first search, and of course just deciding whether to use the energies and use the switch card there to get the Genesect out of the active, and is going to be using the ability just to draw 2 because he has no cards in hand. Oh, there we go. That's what you want to see off of that Genesect. Battle VIP pass, allowing him to get 2 basic Pokemon from his deck, put them straight onto his bench, and really start filling up that bench to activate the Genesect on that Fusion Strike system. Fusion Strike system. I was going to say drive, but that was that was the item in the game, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this is going to be interesting. Does opt to go for that Oricorio as well, kind of reducing the damage and also increasing the amount of cards you can draw as another Fusion Strike Pokemon. And there's the second ability there by the Genesect. Does draw into one of those judges we've talked about already as well, sort of setting himself up for the next turn. Of course, going first, not able to attack, not able to use your supporters, but having that incredible ability to draw so many cards and getting a 3rd Genesect down, I believe. It looks like already with 2 Mews, you know, it's looking good. This is exactly what you want to see as a Mew player, drawing all your cards that you need and just getting ready for your opportunity to apply so much pressure to Alessandro's side.
And we're seeing sort of 3 variants of the Mew VMax right now. You've got the Fusion Strike build, which uses a lesser sparkle. Then you've got the traditional DTE build, double turbo energy. And then you've also started to see ones with Path. And I don't think anyone expected to see Path, the biggest Path user, to be Mew VMax. But this build here, you'll see in the prizes there is a Path to the Peak and a Lost Vacuum. So playing heavily on the idea of Path, Lost Vacuum, get rid of the Path, do your stuff during the turn, and then replace that Path down.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's something that we've started to consider now in a lot of decks. Mew's become awkwardly defensive as time has gone on, but it's just showing the power of the deck being able to adapt so much, with that Forest Sealstone also coming into play as well and not affected by cards like Path, being able to use it under that itself to grab those vacuums, for example. But there's the retreat there into the Mew, and straight over to Alessandro, and there's the Flannery immediately kind of looking to discard that DTE by discarding special energy from one of your opponent's Pokemon and discard a stadium in play.
No stadium in play right now, so that Flannery just to get rid of the energy. This is what we're talking about with this Mewtwo VUnion. It's about disruption until you get that Mewtwo VUnion down. There is the 4 Yveltal in there, which will allow them to get rid of energy, and there's only 4 double turbo energy on the side of Christian, so going to have to be very careful with those energies going down. He played it early on to clear his hand out so he could start popping off this turn with the Genesects, but that does mean he got an energy down which is available for that disruption. Yeah, exactly. And typically, you know, from Christian's side, I would have been quite okay attaching the DT early as well, because Alessandro going into Yveltal so early isn't always the best play, because he wants to be kind of drawing cards with that Snorlax, that Gormandized Snorlax, being able to end your turn, but you get to draw up to 7 cards into your hand. And as a control player, with all these different combo pieces that you typically would need to get to be able to get things like that off, you're going to be wanting drawing through your deck and getting those pieces first before even getting that. But having that Flannery in hand, that one-off copy, instantly getting so much value because Christian played that DT is fantastic for Alessandro. And there we do see now a second Gormandize kind of protecting himself for future turns, and one of those Yveltals coming down now as well. Yeah, that's the dream with control, isn't it? Having the card, the 1 of or 2 of card that you need in your deck on that first turn, having it in the starting hand, and in this case Flannery was there available. And as you mentioned, Gormandize is so key to the draw in this. You got the Pyukimuku, which is there for the 1 draw, but then outside of that, it is very much heavy on the Gormandize. You got Trekking Shoes, so at this point, there's not a huge dig potential to find that Flannery, so thankful in the first hand, and there will be the ability to power pad it back in. So that also means there's potential for another Flannery later on, which could work in a turn where your Veltal's not available. But I think that's the Gormandize right there to end the turn.
Yeah, it's kind of going to be vital for Alessandro to be able to find those pieces where he needs it to kind of disguise his energies. As you mentioned, Christian playing only the 4 DTE build will have to try and look for ways to protect that where possible, which is quite difficult sometimes. And here we see from Christian's side already a path and then an instant lost vacuum to kind of remove that battle VIP pass from his hand as well. Just looking for options there to continue being able to draw cards through his deck. Being able to use double turbo energy, reducing that damage, and then having to use things like Psychic Leap is typically something you would want to try and do. But it's a little bit harder because obviously you're reducing the damage already from the DTE. You also then have to use more power tablets, and the Snorlaxes are beefy boys.
Yeah, 130 hit points with the Psychic Leap only hitting 70, minus 20, it's only 50. So there's not a huge amount of damage there. So you start thinking, well, you need to think Choice Belt, you start thinking about the power tablets and those resources. So there's a lot of resource management required from Christian, but as we mentioned, the Path Lost Vacuum combination there is more of a draw engine of clearing out the hand to be able to then draw more with the Fusion Strike system.
Of course, the Choice Belt really only used for against typically bigger V Pokemon.
Yeah,
of course. So it's going to have to.
On.
Yeah. So with the Mewtwo VUnion, we haven't seen any pieces yet, but the judge did come down. You're disrupting Alessandro's side of the board. This is another fantastic way, of course, to be able to really apply so much pressure to Alessandro because you're taking out a Snorlax, hopefully. Does have that Forest Sealstone attached to that Genesect, giving it that fantastic V-Star power, that Star Alchemy, being able to search your deck for one card and pull it into your hand. Incredible utility card for Mew, considering it's never really had an opportunity to use a V-Star power before.
Exactly, great addition to the deck. And I'm wondering, after watching this start, whether we're even going to see an attempt to get the Mewtwo VUnion now, because I feel like in this matchup, the energy disruption is the key, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right there, because from this position, you're going to be wanting to just kind of remove all of Christian's energies, because there will be turns where Christian will have that energy stuck on one of those Mews. And it's those scenarios you're going to try and target down with your Yveltal, with your Flanneries, being able to remove those energies and create awkward spots for Christian, having to maybe make that little bit of a intricate decision whether he has to Psychic Leap away and expend multiple power tablets to take out a Pokemon. And typically with that 130 HP Snorlax, the Yveltal also with 120 HP will need sort of multiple of those to be able to deal that kind of damage.
Yeah, so it's even you're looking at 3 power tablets at that point.
Exactly.
And you can only do one of those unless you get a lucky Silene with the head flips there. So there is not a huge amount of options here when it comes to playing it off, and maybe early on need to take a risky knockout where you just keep the Mew in play. Also, we'll be just going for 50 and looking to cycle a new Mew into the active.
Yeah, so it does looks like he just wants to kind of preserve those energies as much as possible, kind of identifying and knowing that Alessandro is going to be targeting those as much as possible. I would have maybe liked to have seen a KO because he's used the Judge as well, because you're already restricting Alessandro from what he can do on his turn, and now just giving himself another opportunity to use Gormandize with multiple Snorlax kind of puts Alessandro in a position where he will just keep sort of refreshing his hand almost. As we do see the Ultra Ball come down, and one of those I don't know, I can't tell whether it's the hand or leg pieces right now of the Mewtwo VUnion card there, and just another Gormandize to kind of protect himself from those judges. So he's seen one judge already. He's going to be thinking, we've seen that path. He's going to be thinking maybe it's just more Marnies or more judges coming, so he's going to need those Snorlaxes to protect himself. Yeah,
and we look at the side of Alessandro. So we've got Scoop Up Nets to remove that damage on the Snorlaxes. We also then have 4 Twin Energy, which is going to be needed for the Yveltal to get rid of the energy. So the outs are very similar counts. There's 4 outs to recover a Gormandize and reset the damage, and there's 4 outs for those Twin Energies to attach. What we might see is there's some Psychic and V-Guard energies in there too. You might start seeing those manually attached to your Yveltal to make it more outs for energy attachment. But ultimately, like you said, if that first knockout was done by keeping the Mew in play, then it could have been a cheeky little risk to leave that Twin Energy or the double turbo energy in play and try and keep it there for one more turn.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see whether there'll be turns where Alessandro maybe goes for like a Sydney play to try and get rid of those energies that are maybe hiding away in Christian's hand, ready for the next attacker. But of course, just kind of moving on there. And it's back over to Christian's side. He does get the other Mew down yet again and into another Judge. So it'll be, with double new VMax prize and already putting one back into the deck, he's going to have to find a way to draw into it, of course. Has those Fusion Strike system abilities to be able to do so. And that's why Judge is actually quite a unique, useful card in a deck like this from you.
Yeah, and I think Judge was a reactive addition or replacement to Marnie off that Oranguru, but it does act as quite good disruption still. It's a similar level of disruption to your opponent, to Marnie, but it will just mean you only have 4 cards on your side, and like you said, with Mew, having the ability to draw up to 6 when you've got fully benched Fusion Pokemon on the bench, it works quite nicely with Mew synergistically.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty cool cards here. We have the Cramomatic there with the Battle VIP pass. We see the dice roll. It's a 1 Tails, unfortunately. But at the same time, remember, he does have a Fusion Strike system. It's just more playable cards which allow it. There's a Power Pad. I'd like to see the double Judge come back in because he's going to be using that over and over again to really kind of slow down Alessandro's opportunities to get maybe even energy onto that Yveltal.
Yeah, we'll be seeing whether he takes the risk ever with the Judge plus keeping energy in play strategy. Because as you mentioned, there is outs like Sydney where if you keep the energy in hand for next turn, then the Sydney might be able to remove it. So every part of the of Christian's play has to be conscious of a way it could be disrupted by this controlling archetype. Yeah,
there's so many different ways for Alessandro to kind of remove energies. Of course, hopefully, Christian never wants to see multiple of those DTs in his hand. Looks like he's eyeing up different options here as drawn into those Judges again. Hasn't got, I don't think it was many playable cards to really continue using Fusion Strike system. So it may be another, just a kind of not really doing too much here. Just double checking Alessandro's board in terms of what else to maybe expect from that side. So yeah, it'll be really interesting. Of course, I didn't think I saw an energy yet, but there's just a pass there. The Galamine also in play, so can't really retreat into anything. Not that he really ever wants to.
Yeah, he did have an energy in hand, but then there's that debate of do I play it down and keep it in play, or do I keep it in my hand and have Sydney be an option to potentially get rid of it? And I think the one in play is much more at risk because of the Yveltal being more outs, but even then, he might not be aware the Sydney's available, so he might not have thought about keeping energy in hand and what that might lead to in the future.
Yeah, Alessandro, of course, just Ultra Balling away the Psychic Energy there, obviously already Ultra Balled away one of the body pieces of the Mewtwo VUnion deck. There's another piece coming into his hand. Does have a Research in hand as well. Does play the 4 copies as well. Another way of kind of just bursting through his deck to kind of get to those pieces that he needs and requires. Plays also very unique cards into the VUnion, which is what we're starting to see how we can maybe out-tank certain attackers as well. Does have that V-Guard energy. Being able to attach to his Pokemon so that your Pokemon can take 30 less damage from your opponent's V Pokemon. Does, of course, play the big Parasol. Although Mewtwo VUnion has that great ability to stop effects like the amazing rare Yveltal, the Parasol then kind of at least is able to kind of help protect that if a Path is in play, for example. And then other utility cards like Yellhorn, cards we've all seen before in many control lists. But it's lovely to see kind of Alessandro pick up control again. He's played it before in many other tournaments to great effects and to great finishes. So here we are, back to those control decks again.
Yeah, so many different options. And we spoke earlier on in the first game, we had a Kyurem Palkia list. And it was a very interesting list, lots of different options available. In those kind of lists, though, you're going to be attacking most turns, so you want to have that tempo. Whereas with the control archetype, having lots of these one-offs and different options available, because you're slowing the game down so much, you've got so much draw potential, you're making your opponent have to play around everything. The game slows down enough that you can just draw into them eventually and start using them later in the game. And so a slower-paced game definitely suits the style of this deck, where there's lots of ones and two-ofs, and then there is that ability to recharge some of the supporters with things like Palpad. So a great list here of so many options to worry about.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you, as kind of sort of adding to that as well, typically with things like a controlled deck, you're going to be sort of playing for that one game. Very unlikely to finish 2 games. So you're kind of just making sure you get your game plan out through your plan, your first game as well. So it does play the supporter there, being able to look at the free cards from his prizes and put free back that Peonia, of course. Does miss the Mewtwo VUnion leg there. That's in his prizes, but does find things like the Silene, which are important because he's already, I think, discarded one. So putting that back into his hand, being able to then look for opportunities to loop things. Looks like a Parasol to research. And there was one more card just going back there, just kind of confirming. It's one of those things you've got to start tracking and keeping an idea of exactly where you're putting cards. There's the Pokemon Center Lady being able to heal 60 damage in all special conditions as well. So lots of unique cards in control lists. It's always fun to see which ones players go for.
Yeah, there's so many options that haven't been added that could be, and it depends on what you're up against. And I think the heavy Yveltal count of 4 is definitely a reaction to the success against Lugia. I think the moment we saw the special energy usage on Lugia, we thought, oh, might Cry of Destruction some of those out the play, but it only really works in control because it's too slow in any other deck. You can't just sprinkle this in like you would with a Drapion as a counter. You have to really commit to the 4 of and play down that line. So here, as much consistency available to get as many Yveltals off as possible. And at this stage, there's no energy in play, so Alessandro can just take it slower and keep Gormandizing to get that hand up to whatever he needs in the next turn.
Yeah, but here comes the third judge back-to-back now. Interesting to see that Christian didn't choose to attach the DT that was in his hand before using the judge. Maybe just kind of wanting to, if he doesn't want to miss that Mew VMax, knowing already his prize 2 in that kind of opportunity as well. Of course, does still have access to that V-Star ability. It hasn't used it yet, of course. Plays 2 copies of those Forest Seal Stones with one of those attached, so if suddenly it does go to a Lost Vacuum, it's not too much of an issue. But yeah, another Chromatic's coming down now. Oh, maybe not. It's an Ultra Ball.
So that gets the VMax, so that's one of the pieces required.
Yep.
And we know there's only one in the deck, so drawing into that naturally is going to be pretty tricky over and over again. But as prizes start getting taken, especially one of those right at the bottom of the prize cards, should be taken fairly soon. And then it is just about those energies now, because every energy lost is massive in this, because there's only four double turbo energy. That's the only available options for the Mew VMax.
Yeah, and I can't see, typically with 4DT builds, they'll play one Silene themselves to try and give them additional power tablets or additional energies. And in this case, I think that's one of the cards that Christian's chosen to forego for some maybe of the other tech cards that he's played, like the additional Lost Vacuums and Paths and Judges, and is now having to kind of really resource management those DTEs to make sure he doesn't lose any more. He's already 1 down. That's 25% of your energy's gone.
Yeah, it's scary. And to get it so early on with that Flannery, because we mentioned the likelihood of hitting that Flannery early on is very low. The likelihood of hitting the Yveltal early on is very low, because you really want to focus on the Gormandize. But that early energy loss has definitely made Christian a lot more conscious of putting energy down. And so from now on is going to be hyper aware of over putting energy into play, and is just going to pass again.
Yeah, just doesn't choose to use that V-Star ability, of course, and just passes over, taking a bit more of a slower approach here. Again, sort of maybe not utilizing those judges to great effect. Maybe there's another way, and he's played this matchup, or no, he's going into control and having to focus on this. And there we see the Yell Horn there from Alessandro. Doesn't affect Alessandro, of course, because he's not going to be attacking with that Snorlax. He's just going to be using that ability. But now, with Galamine also in play, that Mew can't free retreat as well. And it's just a Gormandize there, and straight back over to Christian.
And we saw during that turn as well a Psychic Energy being put on Yveltal. Another out is now available with more Psychic Energies. I think the V-Guard energy went into the discard at the start. So just a few more outs for Yveltal after potentially getting judged again. So just increasing the board state as much as possible for Alessandro's favour, and this Yell Horn is just going to cause another challenging thing to move around. As you mentioned, Galamine in play, everything asking as many questions as possible of Christian, and he's got to try and find answers without giving away potential energy at the same time. Yeah,
exactly. Those 4 DTE builds, it's just kind of put himself in a tricky spot, and I think it's just kind of making those decisions. It's just a pass back over to just double checking that everyone's okay with the actions in play there. I think Christian didn't really do too much in this turn, so he was just kind of just drawing and passing back over, knowing Alessandro's not really applying pressure through attacks really. But of course Alessandro can start applying pressure just with those cards like Sydney. He does play 2 copies as well, but it looks like he's going to be eyeing up that POW pad, making sure he gets those key resources back into his deck, like those Peonias and the Silenes, for example.
I didn't quite see what those were. I think there was a Silene and maybe the Sydney or the Pioneer.
Could be a Flannery. It could be so many options at this point, because that Flannery is also, we've seen that come into full effect.
Flannery, not Sydney, yeah. Flannery early on. Yeah, so there's, again, it's all these kinds of options, you know, you've got to play around. Okay, they've used their Flannery now, don't have to worry about that for a bit. And then Power Pad, it's back in, you're like, oh, it's another thing I have to worry about. We haven't, like we said, the Sydney hasn't been played yet. We get the advantage here, we know it could come out, but if Christian is to sit on an energy thinking, I'm only going to play it once I know I can get an attack off, it could then get removed from the hand. So lots to play around here, and I'm sure Christian is aware of what could be in the list, but like every one of these archetypes, is you can't fully know the counts of everything. You don't know whether they've thought, that's probably not worth it at this event. So still needs to wait and see that Sydney, and by the time you see it, it's often too late. Yeah,
there's that Gormandize again, and back over to Christian. He's actually in a really awkward spot because he's got 2 prized Mew VMax, and of course doesn't have any bench space anymore, additionally for another Mew to be able to start Psychic Leaping. He can't just retreat into that Mew, because it would just kind of go into the Mew and have to retreat again.
Is that the Sydney?
There it is. It is. So he's just having a chance to look at his hand. All this information that Alessandro is going to get, knowing what Christian can potentially do next turn. There are playable cards there. There is the Judges. There's some cross switches. But yeah, Sydney being able to, or having to make your opponent reveal their hand, discarding 2 in any combination of tool cards, special energy, and stadium cards. So lots of different options there, but lots of information, which is key for control players.
Yeah, so the information is the main benefactor there, but none of the discard coming through, because there are no tools, stadiums, or special energy in that hand, which is part of the reason why we just seen Christian pass over and over again. He doesn't want to start using everything and start using the Genesects to draw more cards, because if he does, then that starts thinning his deck out, and then that's when deck out becomes an option for the controlling archetype.
Yeah, and that's why he's holding on to that Judge as well. So it's just both players just instant passing across to one another now. Not something I expected to be seeing from a lot of these. You know, I kind of expected with a lot of Mew players trying to take prizes, you know, just in typical fashion very quickly, you know, being hard and aggressive as soon as possible. But Alessandro just being able to quite easily just take his time at this moment, which plays into Alessandro's hands.
And we've still got that confused Mew VMax in the active spot, which once the attacks start hitting, you have to start working out how that will go. So there we go, the Galamine is gone, so a retreat can now happen. But as we mentioned, no Mew VMax to retreat in the same turn, but can retreat and pass and be ready for a future turn here. So just a new option available now for Christian, but not over committing too much with his decisions.
Yeah, so just now having to spend 2 turns to be able to kind of retreat back and forth between the Mews. Does have the DT attached now. I would like to see maybe the Judge come into play here. There's just a quick read of a 3rd different Radiant Pokemon that we've seen now on stream this weekend at Stuttgart Regionals. This Radiant Gardevoir being able to use its Loving Veil ability. All of your Pokemon take 20 less damage from attacks from your opponent's V Pokemon. So those Psychic Leaps are only doing 30 now with DTE attached.
At what point does Christian start taking risks and leave that double turbo energy in play? Because the instant response from the Yveltal would be there. Yep,
and I think that's the biggest worry, which is why you always look to try and combine things like the Marnies or the Judges with a KO on a Snorlax, particularly early on, because there was only 2 Snorlaxes in play. So there would have been back-to-back Snorlaxes, back-to-back hopefully knockouts and Judges at the same time, and then really stopping Alessandro from really building up a board. And he didn't have that Yveltal down with energy before. He had the Yveltal down, but you know, having to then try and dig for a twin energy to be able to use that is it Cry of Destruction attack to be able to discard energies. You know, you have to force pressure like that often in this kind of matchup. But I guess with having already lost one of those DTEs is the biggest thing from Christian's side. He's already kind of been put on a back foot because of it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you mentioned that risk early on. We could see that it was probably the right thing to do, taking that risk. But when you're looking across the board at a control player with a hand, you have no idea what's in it.
Yeah.
There's so many. I mean, we saw that with the Sydney not the Sydney, the Flannery. The Flannery in that first turn. That's something you wouldn't expect in that first hand, and then suddenly you start questioning how many Flannery are in there, how many. And then the Sydneys come out now, and I think there was a double turbo energy in hand for Christian. So there's so much to think about, and that's why he played super safe. Where actually maybe at that point that was the right time to take that first knockout and start putting pressure on.
And there's a Psychic Leap for that heavy 30 damage, which is not something you want to be seeing as a Mew player. That Snorlax still in the active position. as we go into Alessandro's turn now with just that active Mew and, of course, that confused Snorlax, just ready to kind of use Gormandize once again, following that judge by Christian's side of the board, as he's going into multiple trekking shoes, it looks like.
So as a trekking shoes, removing the Roxanne from play, so it's probably not going to come into play based off of the prizes right now. So not for a while anyway.
There's some more information again.
And there's the Flannery.
Oh, and there's the energy. Is that
two
energies?
energy from that?
That's
from
incredible.
the Sydney. The Sydney coming through, removing 2 energy from the hand. There's only 1 now left in deck, which is the one that was Psychic Leaped in. So to have that Sydney come through at that moment, that is unbelievable from the control deck.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking for Christian, and I guess that's why he was kind of focusing on maybe trying to preserve that one of those free energies he had in hand to be able to Psychic Leap, and now he's in a position where only 25% of your energies are left in your deck in your whole game plan against this, and it's going to be incredibly difficult to be able to do much more here. So, and then of course Alessandro can continue seeing so much more information as well, and there comes a quick ball, of course, after a Gormandize from Alessandro to kind of build up his board again. And Christian here just kind of staring down at these Snorlaxes and Yveltals on the bench, just having to just pass over and just get that Mew ready. Really, really tricky spot, and looking rather unfortunate here for Christian.
Oh, there's that Pal Pad was brought to the top of the discard pile to see whether it was in there, and that's just brought in the Silene as an option. So there's 1 heads there. That's going to put the Pal Pad back on top of the deck, and that means that we can start bringing more Sydneys, more Flannerys, maybe even another Silene, and start looping resource management there. So yeah, this discard pile is so active now for options to bring back into the deck.
Yeah, I mean, both players, of course, at a 2-0 record, both already winning their rounds 1 and round 2. Alessandro, of course, we'll find out at some point throughout this tournament, of course, what Alessandro has played against in those rounds. Just passing back over, having already got quite a big hand. Christian drawing an instant, returning back.
That's the Pal Pad.
There you go. Now, again, looking at all these options that Alessandro has outs to from that discard pile. Oh, there's the team's Yell Cheer being able to put 3 supporters back in.
Oh, wow.
Which kind of, you want to be utilizing the value of the Pal Pad with the team Yell's Cheer, because then you're getting as many cards, as many outs as possible. And, that's why you want to focus on the Pal Pads once you've been able to do so. And now has it back in hand as well. Yeah, again, kind of that level of sequencing. We've seen Alessandro, as I mentioned, has been a control player before to fantastic results. And picking up this Mewtwo VUnion that was touted to come back into the game, into this tournament. Going back a bit full circle, we saw it come out in NAIC towards the end of last season, but of course still within the format. Massive pool of cards now as well, which is very unique to see why we're seeing so many cool little techs from multiple decks.
And all the different supporters that are available, and as we've seen multiple times here, there's Pal Pad and the Team Yell Cheer to bring back multiple supporters, so that means you can start looping Energy Denial, that means you can start looping Silenes, you can loop Pioneer if you need to start looking for more of the Mewtwo pieces. So there's so many options there to keep bringing back in the deck. And then the main addition from the Mewtwo VUnions of the past is that Yveltal, which is so good into all of the special energy that's so popular in the format right now. The best deck in the format, Lugia V-Star, done so well at LAIC. One of the few decks that was able to counter it was the Control archetype that made top 8, and that was for Cry of Destruction Yveltal. So definitely seeing Control in a great spot right now. And it has had a little bit of a break from being so dominant.
Silene is at a double heads from Alessandro there. There's the Power Pad coming back in once again. And just any other card straight to the top.
And there's that V-Guard energy. And again, that was in the deck from the start. And it was a card that we thought was out of the play for a while. But nothing's out of the play when you play Control. That discard pile is very active and something you always have to manage. And we've seen Christian take multiple looks at it throughout the game, being very aware that he has to be conscious of all the resources in play. And this is not looking good for Christian.
A Gormandize for 1, back over to Christian, an instant pass again. Does play the Tracker Shoes, sees a Twin Energy just kind of waiting for him, and he's going to put it into hand, kind of have it ready, of course, as well. Just at this point, kind of making sure a retreat option is available there as well, because that Gardevoir does have a bit of a heavy retreat cost, as you kind of expect. does have the option to attack with Psychic as well, playing the Psychic energy. Kind of a nice way of using a bit of an out for other cards, which is kind of cool.
Especially with the control matchup, once you've got rid of all the energy, the question is then, do I deck out first or do you deck out first? And the two control decks we've seen a lot of recently have that ability to attack to finish off the game. It's low damage output, but they can just keep attacking to finish off the game. And
Christian there, I think he's had that DT in the hand for a while now. Does Ultra Ball for the Mew VMax, and of course will be Psychic Leaping yet again.
That Snorlax has done well. It's taken 3 hits.
It's not what you typically would expect. That's why Alessandro has 2 more on the bench. But that Snorlax, as you said, just kind of eaten those attacks from the Mew. Not typically what you would see. But again, Christian just looking to preserve his deck. Maybe look to try and not deck out as quickly also. And just preserve that last remaining energy. He just can't let it go anymore.
We mentioned about the potential for attacking with Gardevoir. Well, there is the fact that the Psychic Leap is a continuous loop into the deck, so you can guarantee not decking out, which is one of Control's big ways of winning, is forcing a deck out. But right now we see the Sydney.
Sydney just see what's in hand. Those 2 power tablets, a chromatic and the cross switches. So they're the only other the switching out that we mentioned obviously when the Galar Mine was in play. Obviously that confused Mew VMax earlier, but it's just drawing cards and passing at the moment. Doesn't really need to do too much. Not too sure if he's kind of having to play for the time at the moment with 18 minutes on the clock. Can Alessandro find a way to maybe apply some pressure by attacking, or whether it's the case of maybe it's just trying to find a way to deck out Christian in this way now.
So Snorlax has that body slam for 4 colorless energy, so 2 twin energies would work there.
There you go. Look, it looks like we're seeing it. Here we go, the scoop up net for the active Snorlax that was confused, going into a body slam.
Goodness gracious.
Got a fantastic opportunity to paralyze as well, so can't even Psychic Leap. Will be doing 80 damage, of course, with that Oricorio. Just confirming exactly. Here's the flip. It's a Tails, no paralyze there, so an opportunity to Psychic Leap away if he does find the energies. Of course, still has access to that V-Star power from the Forest Seal Stone at late stage, but for now, still plenty out of range, you'd like to think. So still got plenty of turns to go.
And right now, the attacks can continuously come out with the body slam, with the potential for paralysis as well. Let's not forget that. And if Christian chooses to attack and knock the Snorlax out, the instant response to the Cryo Destruction will remove the final energy from play. And at this point, Alessandro isn't aware there's no Silene, so in his head might think there's a way to get those energy back still. But looking at this is just
is that the paralyze?
This is a win condition, just continually trying to knock out the Mew VMax.
Yeah, so I think that was a heads. Need to confirm that. Oh,
there we go.
That's that. Left is sleep. So sleep with the L is left, and paralyze with the R is to the right, for you guys to remember back at home, and for us to remember as well.
So the way I remember it is what I did with Jirachi all those times whenever I just kept turning it to the left, so I always just remember left is sleep.
Yeah. Well, that's just a nice little way for everyone to remember.
So sleep with an L.
And paralyze with an R to the right.
Lovely.
There you go. We do see the cross switcher play, of course, to kind of get out of that as an option, which is what Christian was kind of hoping to see. Does target the other Gormanized Snorlax there, because obviously is a big bulky boy, won't be retreating anytime soon. Of course, has the scoop up nets to be able to do so.
There it is.
But
thinking about playing it. There we go.
Straight back in. Here we go.
Oh, Chris, because this is it, right? Christian doesn't know the counts of everything, so he's seen 1 scoop up net, but as we mentioned before, there's 4 scoop up net. It's very much a consistency card, one that, especially with the Gormandized Snorlax in the active, you really want to get rid of it at those key moments to get your Veltal in play. Yeah,
it's the same what we saw when Mewtwo VUnion became a deck at NAIC. When you're getting the big Mewtwo out, you're going to want just the Mewtwo VUnion, because by then you're probably giving up 4 prizes. And then you just got a really big tanky 310 HP 4-piece Pokemon that comes out. So those scoop up nets allow you to then remove all those remaining prizes that could be taken. And you kind of expect a minimum 3 and the 4 count kind of gives that maximum consistency level there. There's a chromatic heads by Christian after that paralyze by that Gormandized Snorlax yet again. That body slam putting in work right now. Isn't a 2-hit KO on the Mew. Which is potentially a little bit unfortunate as well. Interesting to see what Christian may go for here. Of course, doesn't have an easy retreat option here now as well, because every other Pokemon has energy on it. I mean, one of the Yvel's only one Psychic, but only needs one more energy to be able to retreat, and then the Gormanized Snorlax, there it is. And then the Gormanized Snorlax could potentially come back up.
So yeah, bossing up the Yveltal with a single Psychic on, and does have a 2 retreat cost, so it's not guaranteed to be moved out of play, but as we mentioned, there is many different options for the Mewtwo VUnion deck to get out of the active spot, and that is one of them. Another scoop up net, as you see Christian, every time a scoop up net comes down, he's like, yep, you have a lot of those, it seems, and we know they can come back into play with the Silene, so technically there is more than 4 of every card in this deck if you want it to be, if it really is that important a resource with Silene.
Here's the Body Slam Paralyze, it's another heads, it's a 2. Celebration celebration by Alessandro there. Christian kind of just staring at Alessandro and just not being able to do too much at the moment. Looks like he's going to be giving up this Mew, just having to pass back over, Paralyze going back to the not Paralyze anymore. And then this Snorlax is not what you'd expect to be doing. It's normally there to be drawing cards and getting through your deck, but as a utility attacker in this position, having gotten rid of 3 DTEs, it's not terrible at all being able to Paralyze.
If there's any Snorlax fans out there, it's one of the strongest single prize cards released in Pokemon right now. 3 different Snorlax viable in competitive decks.
And there it is, taken 2 prizes. And unique to see from Alessandro picking his prizes. Oh, of course, because he used Peonia, knows what the bottom bottom 3 are, so he's just going for the other cards and does find the other Mewtwo VUnion leg there as well.
But not his best attacker, the Snorlax is still in the prizes.
Got plenty in hand, so he's okay, I think. There's another Mew coming down from Christian's side. Does have that damaged Mew VMax. Does look like he doesn't have many cards left in his deck. Starting to get really thin now. Looking to use that Judge. Will be looking to try and leap back in where possible. So it's going to be, he's in a tricky spot. I mean, 50 minutes to play 3 games is typically quite difficult. Maybe less so with the Lugia V-Star decks and other things like Mew now as well, facing up against it. But against a control deck where playing 1 game, very typically doable. So I don't know if Christian's maybe sort of hoping to try and get just eke out a tie somehow by not decking out, but it's very difficult with still 12 minutes to play. It looks like he's going to be trying to... he does take the knockout this time.
Okay. That's just going to remove the energy there with the response.
Yeah, I wonder if Christian's just kind of, sealing his fate a little bit, unfortunately. As mentioned, there is no Silene in his list, which means he won't be able to get any energies back. And there's that twin energy on that Yvel with that Cry of Destruction we're going to see for the first time today. To remove up to 3 special energies. Of course, just that 1 sitting on that lonely Mew VMax now. But I think Christian knew the writing is likely knowing that the writing's on the wall. I can't see a way out of it at the moment. But, Alessandro's still making sure he's sequencing correctly. Maybe he doesn't know, of course, that Christian doesn't play the Silene. We've got that kind of stream caster view that we're very privileged to have, of course.
Yeah, and at this point, all energy will be removed from play after this Yveltal. And that's the downside right now, and the crossfire of Lugia being such a heavy special energy deck, Yveltal very accessible, and all those other special energy removal that we mentioned, like Sydney, which got the 2 energy in 1 turn from the hand, and then the Flannery early on to get that first double turbo energy. And that's going to be a scoop there. And so now Christian has to hope for a quick game.
2 of our round 3 feature match. Just again, some of the prizes that again from both sides, kind of what you expect. Nothing too crazy. Not the 2 Mew VMax this time. But here's game 2 for everyone back at home. 1-0 right now to Alessandro, and it looks like Christian will be. Did he kick off? I wasn't quite sure, but it was a quick motion there.
Yeah, I think. I mean, we might have missed. He might have played both those down and gone first, but
multiple Pokemon are coming down from Alessandro's side of the board, so benching is going to be very unlikely. And then of course that Gormanize in the active spot, playing the maximum 4 copies, increasing those odds to start it, means he's just going to draw up to 7 yet again.
Yeah, so we don't quite know just yet whether Christian went first or not. could have been a quick first turn. And that's the other thing as well. Christian's aware of times. He's going to be playing a bit quicker maybe to try and get through the game. And as we mentioned, nothing too crazy in either the prizes at this stage, but a prize check still important for Alessandro, especially with, there is some important pieces like the late game team yell cheer would be potentially useful. But with the access to Pioneer, it's really important to know whether there's anything you want to take off of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think from Christian, I mean, there's the double power tablets in there because we know being able to use certain attacks, if there's a way of using things like Max Miracle, with the DT only doing 110, you're not really being able to knock out a Snorlax, so you actually sometimes have to use a tablet. Will Christian be able to maybe get a few different Mews in play, so like 2 Mew VMaxes and then 1 Mew to be able to use the Psychic Leap when he so chooses. So lots of different things there. As we kind of see Christian's hand right now, again, all those shiny cards, double energy there. Sort of Alessandro, if only he knew, and sort of would be licking his lips with those Sydney plays that will be available to him, of course. But yeah, double DT in hand there for Christian, as we kind of just quickly saw. But of course, Alessandro's still playing out his turn and just gormandizing. Looks like for a nice... Oh, there he goes to the 7.
Yeah, so got the threat of the Yveltal on the bench there. So if we were to remove that, that would be the dream turn here for Christian, to be able to get rid of the Yveltal on the bench. And there's going to be a potential here to draw through. We've got the Ultra Ball, find the Mew VMax, and then it will also be able to potentially judge, but then you'd need to turn into the cross switches, which would be quite tricky. But right now, getting an attack off, and at this stage, he's going to try and tempo out at the early stages.
This is confirmation that Christian did go first, of course, as well, because he's obviously evolved up to the Mew VMax. And now being able to use the judge, again, I've said it a couple of times, he wants to be attacking if he can as soon as possible, knocking out the Snorlaxes, disrupting. Does have that unfortunate scenario where Alessandro does have that Yveltal ready, but it also means Alessandro won't be using Gormandize that turn if he's going to use Cryo Destruction. So Alessandro's hand will still be a maximum of 5 at that stage, unless he has cards like the Trekking Shoes, etc. So a few different options. Both players just kind of making sure. One of the key things as you are drawing cards as well, making sure that you don't necessarily always fan draw, which is vital. We've seen a lot of players throughout different tournaments pick up and select, make sure they're putting down 4 from the judge or Marnie, etc. Because you don't want to see the extra card and give away additional information or potential prizes and penalties.
And a habit as well with being used to Marnie, playing a judge. It could be very easy in the heat of the moment to take 5 thinking, oh, it's a Marnie.
Yeah.
But, judge a last-minute switch change for a lot of players reactively to LAIC to try and counter that Oranguru on Lugia V-Star. But here it is just great disruption to take away that Gormandize hand of 7 and take away options. And as you mentioned, if there's no Gormandize from that Yveltal, a lot of disruption potential there. So Christian playing aggressively here, and in hindsight, this is potentially what should have happened in that first game, and I think that's why he's gone in so quickly and gone for this strategy. Yeah, so obviously knowing there's not a way of sort of benching Alessandro now, Alessandro still has options. He doesn't necessarily have to use Yveltal and the Cryo Destruction next turn as well. Just can continue kind of going through his deck with the with Gormandize. Of course, we'll be looking to try and get another Snorlax down if that's the play he chooses to go for. As we see Christian's side of the board, he's going for the second Fusion Strike system there, continuing going through his deck, getting the Forest Sealstone, lots of cards, getting rid of those Battle VIP Pass, discarding it with a Quick Ball, getting more Fusion Strike Pokemon. There you go, as mentioned a moment ago, there's the third Mew V come down, or mixture of Mew VMax and Mew Vs. Which is interesting to see, because typically you don't really mind too much about damage happening in your board against control. Yeah, because Oricorio was last game was brought down, but this time not so relevant in the early game push that Christian's going for here. And you see another energy in hand. So the question is now, okay, so the cross switcher does come out, so that means the Yveltal is going to be removed from play. It is possible to insta-play from hand. There's no evolution needed, but to find it in that judged hand is going to be really tricky. Yeah, I mean, with no energies prize from Christian's side of the board, yeah, there's the Flannery straight out. Doesn't even need it. There it is. The Yveltal's there, and he's just going to look to Gormandize there to bring it up to 7. So another gust effect going to be needed to remove the next Yveltal. Yeah, so because Alessandro was sitting on that Flannery, even if that active Gormandize was KO'd instead of the Yveltal that was on the bench,
I think he would have just promoted the other Snorlax and been happy to Gormandize again, knowing his Yveltal can be used later for some of those energies. So it's just worked out really nicely for Alessandro there. Just having it in the hand, still having both Snorlaxes, just kind of at the threat of potentially being judged again. But here's a Serena using it for the second effect of being, first effect, sorry, discarding up to 3 cards from your hand and then drawing until you have 5. Of course, a really cool utility card with multiple options. We've seen it before with different supporters. But again, here's another energy slammed down by Christian. I didn't get confirmation of which attack he used last turn, because if he did use the Genesect attack, Technoblast, after the Mew, he won't be able to attack again.
Yeah, and didn't have access to Max Miracle because there was only Mews on the bench, right? So it must have been a Technoblast.
Oh, there is now a second, so maybe he switched into it.
Okay, yes.
So
we didn't see that.
Something we just got to make sure we confirm again. But yeah, there's that opportunity there, so that might have been the case. But we've seen some more Fusion Strike systems, more opportunities to draw through into his deck. There's the Power Tablet. Maybe looking to use Max Miracle, as I mentioned before, now dealing 140 damage with that DTE. So just confirming exactly. Oh, switch cart. Ooh. Oh yeah, so retreat and then switch cart it back into it. Of course, switch cart, one of those key cards to heal a little bit damage to kind of help you against Lost Box decks. But remember, only able to switch your active basic Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon.
Yeah, so he must have said something like, I retreated this and then switch carted back with the Mew.
So we didn't see a move, but again, just to make sure the viewers at home are able to follow. Again, I think we were right with the DTE being attached to the active that had attacked last turn.
Yeah, so it must have been Technoblast. Just based off of that alone, we can work it out. So by playing down that Power Tablet, as we mentioned, there is a Mew VMax on the bench, so Max Miracle is an option.
Does it go through?
Because it ignores the effect.
Yeah, ignores the effect. So that Gardevoir there not having to play into effect there because of that Max Miracle attack available by the Mew VMax is able to still take the knockout there. There's the Power Pad coming down from Alessandro. He knows he's already gotten rid of one DTE. This Yveltal in the active spot. His hand wasn't disrupted, so he's got plenty of cards there at the moment. So can now go for this Yveltal play without too many drawbacks. So again, seeing Alessandro's game plan really come to the fore here, as we just kind of see the time is beginning to tick down towards that 0.
And that's the key, as you mentioned. It's very hard to get multiple games out with control, and that's where you start asking the question of, should I have scooped first game once I got that Sydney come into play? And then this is all the kind of questions you start asking when you're playing against a deck like this. And I do wonder, how much practice did Christian get against Mewtwo VUnion? Because I saw Christian yesterday practicing. It was a lot of Lugia, a lot of Mew, all of these people practicing together. Very common decks today, but then things like Mewtwo VUnion and the kind of cards that are in it, there's a lot to think about, a lot to play around. So you haven't had a chance to practice against it. It could be a lot of thinking on the spot right now for Christian, and he's definitely learning a lot.
Okay, so we just got confirmation that there is a bit of a time extension for this game as well. So just a little bit longer, so the time has kind of gone on our clock on the screen right now. We've also just seen a card we haven't really mentioned yet, but that Galarian Meowth come down with that V-Guard energy attached to it. But again, kind of giving that opportunity to be a bit of a pivot later. Does need 2 energy to retreat, but typically a card that you see with and alongside the Mewtwo VUnion deck and cards as well, because you could use its Evolution Roar to discard 2 cards from your hand, and that's another way of getting those VUnion pieces into the discard, and also that utility with Snorlax to be able to then draw more cards back up again. And we do see that Cryo Destruction, and now a retreat into another Mew, into the 3rd DTE that Christian has, and straight into another attack there. Taking another prize. That's down to 3. Yep, just confirming there. I think Christian's just checking with the judge. And I think, because there's no other 2 prizes there, Christian, with how time works, would only have 2 turns left. Potentially only even 1, depending on when that time was called. And I think he knows that's a bit of a having to just concede there.